Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Um, today, the portion is Tavo. Now, it begins with Moses telling our people, when we enter the promised land, we were to offer the best of the land's produce in gratitude for God giving us this land. And we were to bring it to the priest who was in charge of the place that God chose. That differed from what the pagans would do. We had to declare, I have entered the land that Adonai Yud He Vav He swore to our fathers to give to us, and that we remembered that our fugitive forefather who had traveled to Egypt was there when, and he, sorry, we remembered our fugitive forefather who traveled to Egypt, and that when our people had multiplied and thrived, that same nation, Egypt, that had once given us safe harbor, turned against us, enslaved us, and treated us harshly. Moses reminded us that it was only after a lot of suffering that we cried out in anguish to our Creator. He heard us and brought us out with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm with awesome deeds and signs and wonders. We've been telling this story for thousands of years so that future generations would remember this pattern of behavior and not repeat it. But sadly, prosperity leads to complacency. Complacency often leads to idolatry, and idolatry leads to God allowing our enemies to rise against us until we once again cry out for God to save us. In Deuteronomy 26:11, Moses tells us to rejoice and to bring him our tithes to show our gratitude for every good thing that the Lord our God gave to us, to the Levite, to the Ger, and the stranger among us. Instead of being grateful, we make jokes about how much we kvetch, which means complain. We blame God and the terrible leaders whom we chose, instead of taking responsibility for our choices. We were instructed to tithe an additional amount every third year to care for our most vulnerable, the Levite, the Ger, the orphan, and the widow. And we were to acknowledge that we remembered and obeyed his 10 commandments. In fact, Moses was told to set up large stones of plaster on Mount Ebal, upon which he was to inscribe the 10 commandments, so that all those who entered and lived in the land would know exactly what was expected of them. The Israelites were reminded of God's call on their life. It says, Yud He Vav He has affirmed this day that you are, as promised, God's treasured people, who shall observe all his commandments, and that he will set you in fame and renown and glory high above all the nations that he has made, and that you shall be, as promised, a people separated to Yud He Vav He, our God. High above all the nations didn't mean that it was a source of pride, but rather that we held a place of high responsibility to the rest of God's creation, and that we were chosen to set the standard of morality. Deuteronomy 28:10 says, all the people of the earth shall see that you are called by the name of Yud He Vav He, and they shall revere and fear you. We were chosen to represent the Creator before all the nations. And when we don't, it reflects poorly on the one and only God who called us. So not only would we suffer the consequences, but so would all humanity. That's a huge burden. But we did say it at Mount Sinai that we would do it. In Deuteronomy 28:44, Moses was speaking to Israel. But if you do not obey your God, Yud He Vav He, to observe faithfully all the mitzvot, the commandments, and the chukim, his regulations, which I command you this day, all these curses shall come upon you and take effect. Verse 20 says, Yud He Vav He will let loose against you calamity, panic, and frustration in all the enterprises you undertake, so that you shall soon be utterly wiped out because of your evil doing in forsaking me. Wow, that's strong. How many people today are taking medication for anxiety? This is what it says here. Deuteronomy 28:47-48 says, They shall serve as signs and proofs against you and your offspring for all time, because you would not serve your God, Yud He Vav He, in gladness and joy over the abundance of everything, in hunger and thirst, naked and lacking everything. You shall have to serve the enemies, whom the Lord will let loose against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until you are wiped out. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, which will sweep down like the eagle, a nation whose language you do not understand, a ruthless nation that will show the influential no regard and the vulnerable no mercy. Most of us could never have imagined the price we would have to pay for these words. Just look up the nations throughout history who have used the eagle as their official symbol and see if they stand with us. Well, Tavo ends in chapter 29, 1-3, where Moses says, it says, And Moses called to all Israel and said to them, You have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land. Yet to this day the Lord has not given you a heart to perceive. That means a mind. The heart is a mind to understand, eyes to see, and ears to hear. It's so difficult to understand this passage because in our human frame, how can we understand the workings of the soul? Some can see and some yet cannot see yet. Moses continues to remind the people of what God did for them. I led you through the wilderness 40 years. The clothes on your back did not wear out, nor did the sandals on your feet. Therefore, keep the words of this covenant and do them, so that you may prosper in all you do. In Deuteronomy 28, it was so difficult to read all the curses, but read them we must. It's like having to swallow bad tasting medicine in order for us to be cured. The blessings encompass everything we could ever want and what we can only dream of during our times of trouble. Deuteronomy 28:7 says, The Lord shall cause your enemies who rise up against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. Isn't this what our IDF needs to rely on right now? Every war story in the scriptures shouts victory whenever we trusted God, whenever we were obedient to Him and allowed Him to take the lead. It was never about following all the religious doctrines and dogmas amassed over thousands of years. And God warned us, do not add, do not take away anything from my words. Yet that's exactly what every religious leader has done. And our disobedience is leading to our downfall, not only for us, but also for all those to whom we were to be a light. This past Wednesday, my heart was so broken when I heard that Charlie Kirk, and I listened a lot to him. He was a 31-year-old American hero, a Christian who loved God and loved Israel. And he was shot to death, assassinated, while speaking at a university in Utah. He was shot by a brainwashed, God-hating student. Charlie was loved by so many because he spoke reason, common sense, and taught God's principles to students who are thirsty for truth. You know, I thought of Yeshua, how the people must have felt because he spoke truth at a time when only evil was being honored by the powers to be. I was so devastated when I heard the news of Charlie. How could this keep happening? And then a verse from Luke that our rabbi used to quote came to my mind. To much whom is given, no, sorry, to whom much is given, much is required. To whom much is given, much is required. The Israelites were given much, and we were to share it with the world. But instead, what do? We are saying to those like Charlie, we have our God, Yud He Vav He, but you can have your God. There is only one God for all peoples, and his name is Yud He Vav He, not any other name. Any other name is simply idolatry. The scriptures are clear. Charlie was our ger, the stranger among us, and I felt like we had failed him, that we even failed that deluded young man. I am part of Israel, and according to Tavo, Israel is failing all humanity because we are not, as a whole, united in accepting our calling as Or Lagoyim, a light to the nations. We are failing because we are not, by our example, teaching the world the Ten Commandments, fighting to put them back in our schools and in our government offices and in our courthouses. You know, I pictured myself standing on a mountaintop in Israel, shouting all these words to our people and to those of us scattered around the world, and that we would finally take them to heart and obey them so that our God would turn the trajectory of this world's morality from darkness to light. But then I thought, even my own family doesn't listen to me. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself couldn't get his people to trust God. Our prophets all tried to get us to listen and failed. And later, during the Roman occupation, Rabbi Yeshua tried to get our people to return to God's written Torah. However, the religious authority of that day were threatened by his words of freedom and truth, and this minority, handed him over to the Romans to be stopped, while the rest of the people mourned his death. Charlie's words to today's youth were bringing truth, and I honor his courage, and I pray for his family who were robbed of a loving husband and father. However, true freedom can only come from the God of Israel. Our sages say that Jerusalem is the navel of the earth, based upon Ezekiel. The United States of America, the countries of Europe, or any other country were not called by the Creator to represent him. It has nothing to do with value. It has to do with our role. It was simply God's choice. At the heart of Israel lies the written Torah, which contains the secret for all humanity to be able to choose between a world filled with blessings or curses, good or evil. Yet how many of my people, our people, are reading its words? They're now being drowned out by so many other ideologies. But I know I can't waste my time being upset at the people who taught this young man to hate. I am disappointed with myself because I don't even speak out strongly and clearly to my own family. I don't have the courage sometimes. And when I try, I feel like I'm up against an invisible wall of prejudices and past guilt. And for this, I ask God's forgiveness. But how far back can we go to cast blame? All the way to Adam and Eve? We can't go back. We have to just keep going forward, and one by one, we can change what we do. We can change what we say. We can change how we behave and how we trust our God. Our Haftorah portion in Isaiah 60 touched me to the core of my being. I had my hands over my eyes just reading this. Behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But upon you, Israel, God will shine, and his glory shall be seen over you. Raise your eyes and look around, and see all who have gathered together and come to you. Your sons and your daughters, your sons shall be brought from afar, and your daughters shall be nursed at your side. Violence shall be no more in the land. Violence, which is in Hebrew Hamas, shall no more be heard in your land, nor desolation and destruction within your borders. But you shall name your walls Yeshua, salvation, and your gates Tehillah, praise. Your people shall all be righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. And I'm going back. They are the branch that I planted, the work of my hands in which I glory. The smallest shall become 1,000, and the least a mighty nation. Ani Adonai, like Mauricio spoke about last week. Ani Adonai, I, the Lord, will hasten it in due time. The past is gone, and although the present may at times look dark, look bleak, our future is a glorious one and is in the hands of our Creator. Baruch Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.